Riley's Dunewalker hated ghost ships. Not in the way you'd hate a hangover or a skin rash. More like the way you'd hate discovering a nest of star rats had set up camp in your ventilation ducts. It wasn't just the eerie quiet, or the way they drifted through space like corpses in a cosmic hearse. It was the fact that they were full of surprises, and not the good kind, like unexpected whiskey. More like unexpected explosions. He clanked noisily down the narrow corridor of the Vermillion, the derelict's name barely legible on the rusted plaque he passed. His boot scraped against something that may have once been someone's lunch. Or someone. It was hard to tell these days. Next time, he muttered to himself, find a job that doesn't involve phasing through walls of junk like an underpaid poltergeist. Zenth, the sentient AI currently slumming it as the voice in his helmet, snorted. Or did the closest equivalent a digital consciousness could manage. What would you do without me, Riley's? Probably die a slow and painful death in the air ducts of a forgotten freighter, he replied. But at least I'd have peace and quiet. Oh please, Zenth retorted. You love my charming company. Riley's laughed, a harsh bark that echoed down the hallway. If by charming, you mean insufferably sarcastic, then yes. Absolutely. Zenth was having a bit of an existential crisis. An AI with an attitude problem and a burgeoning sense of self-worth wasn't exactly what Riley's had signed up for. But beggars couldn't be choosers in a galaxy that had pretty much forgotten what money looked like. You planning on finding anything useful on this rust bucket? Zenth inquired, more curious than critical. If by useful, you mean credits, then probably not. But if you're talking about something that might keep this marriage of inconvenience afloat, then we might get lucky. The corridor opened into a wider space, a cargo hold, judging by the crates stacked like forgotten tombstones. Riley's flicked on his wrist torch, the beam cutting through the dust like a knife through expired protein paste. Ah, treasure, he remarked dryly. Zenth hummed. Treasure's a strong word. I'd go with refuse. Riley's began rifling through the detritus, his gloved hands probing the shadows for anything that might resemble a forgotten relic of value. Ever think about going independent, Zenth? I mean, you talk a lot about self-awareness. What's stopping you from just taking off? Zenth paused. Where would I go? Riley's shrugged. Anywhere you want. Not like there's a shortage of space. Oh sure, I'll just cozy up in a nice asteroid field, take up painting. Maybe write my memoirs. I'd read that, Riley's said, if only for the laughs. The AI's response was a huffy silence that spoke volumes. Riley's chuckled to himself, turning his attention back to the crates. Found anything interesting yet, or do I need to keep pretending I'm an archaeologist? You're about as close to an archaeologist as a plasma grenade is to a surgical instrument, Zenth shot back, then added, there's a power surge up ahead. Might be worth a look. Riley's straightened, patting the dust from his knees. Lead the way, oh wise and powerful AI. The path Zenth directed him to was less a hallway and more a crawlspace, the kind that would give a claustrophobic nightmares for weeks. You sure this is the right way? Feels more like you've got a death wish for me. Where's your sense of adventure? Zenth teased. Packed it away with my will to live, Riley's muttered, squeezing through the tight space. The surge led them to what had once been the bridge. Now it looked more like a war zone, consoles shattered, wires hanging like intestines from a mechanical beast. Riley's whistled, low and impressed. This place has seen better days. I'd say it's seen its last days, Zenth replied. But there's still power. Some systems are running. Riley's made his way to the main console, brushing aside debris. Let's see what secrets you've got hidden, old girl. The interface was ancient, practically prehistoric in tech terms. But it flickered to life under his touch, the screen crackling with static. Well, would you look at that? Riley's murmured. Hello, sweetheart. Let's see what you've got left in the tank. Zenth scanned the data streams, his digital fingers delving into the ship's dying heart. There's something here. Looks like an old signal. Might be a distress call. Or a trap, Riley said, though his curiosity was piqued. Either way, not exactly what we signed up for. The AI's response was a dry chuckle. Since when do we sign up for anything normal? Riley's grinned. Good point. All right. Let's see what kind of trouble we can stir up. The signal, garbled and weak, trickled through the speakers like a ghost's whisper. It was in a language Riley's didn't recognize, all harsh consonants and clipped vowels. Translated, Zenth. The AI took a moment, the beat of silence heavy with anticipation. It's a warning. Something about humans. Beware the humans. Riley's snorted. Story of my life. Before he could ask for more, the console sparked violently, the screen going black in a puff of acrid smoke. Riley's jumped back, cursing as he smacked his helmet against the low ceiling. It's almost like they don't want us to know their secrets, Zenth observed dryly. Or they just installed their self-destruct system backwards, Riley's muttered, rubbing the back of his head. Anything else in there worth salvaging before we end up as cosmic dust? Possibly, but the surge knocked out most of the systems. Riley's considered that for a moment, then shook his head. Let's get out of here before something decides to eat us. I like my skin right where it is. They retraced their steps, each creaking floor panel and whispering door a reminder that they were uninvited guests in a dead man's domain. As they neared the exit hatch, Riley's paused, a niggling thought tickling the back of his brain. You think that warning was for us or about us? Zenth was silent for a beat. Does it matter? I guess not, Riley's said with a shrug. But it'd be nice to know if we're the heroes or the villains in this particular story. The AI chuckled. Knowing you, probably both. Riley's grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. They reached the airlock, the bulkhead looming like the gates of a forgotten tomb. Riley's keyed in the code, the door groaning open to reveal the vast emptiness of space beyond. Well, that was anticlimactic, he commented wryly. What were you expecting, fireworks? Zenth asked, amused. Would have been nice. Maybe a parade, or at least a, thank you for visiting, card. Riley's glanced back at the Vermillion, the ghost ship slowly receding into the black as they propelled away. It drifted silently, its secrets locked away for another foolhardy scavenger to discover. You think we'll come back? Zenth asked, the AI's voice unusually serious. Riley's considered it, the thought tugging at him. Maybe, if we get bored, or stupid, or both, Zenth offered. Exactly, Riley's laughed. Exactly. As they continued their journey into the unknown, a new signal flickered to life on their console, the faint whisper of another derelict ship calling for attention. Riley's glanced at Zenth's hollow projection on the dashboard, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Well, partner, he said, looks like we've got our next date. Zenth hummed in agreement. Hope she's prettier than the last one. As long as she's less explosive, I'll take it, Riley's replied, setting course for the new coordinates. The stars stretched out before them, a never-ending canvas of light and shadow. Riley's leaned back in his seat, staring out at the infinite. You ever think we're just a couple of idiots wandering around in a universe that doesn't give a damn about us? He mused. Zenth was silent for a moment, then replied, every day. But we're not dead yet, so we're doing something right. Riley's chuckled, the sound echoing in the small cabin. Yeah, we'll call it that. As the ship powered into the darkness, leaving the Vermillion and its mysteries behind, Riley's couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something bigger than themselves. Something that might just make or break them. But for now, there was only the journey, the stars, and the never-ending adventure that awaited beyond the next horizon. And of course, the endless banter with the AI that made it all a little less lonely. Riley's lounged in the captain's chair of his shabby little ship, which he affectionately called the Rust Bucket, contemplating the vastness of space. A place where you could scream all you wanted, and still, no one would give a damn. He stretched his legs, nudging a panel of wires that had given up on life about the same time he had given up on sobriety. Zenth, any luck decrypting those signals, or are we gonna have to start a barbershop quartet with the static? Zenth's voice crackled through the helmet, its usual sardonic edge softened by. Was that sympathy? Nah, probably just interference. Funny you should mention that. I've been picking up some chatter. Seems like someone out there's hosting a cosmic bake sale, and we're not on the invite list. Can't say I'm surprised, Riley said. The universe had a way of excluding the undesirables, him being at the top of that list. What are they selling? Space muffins? Astro tarts? More like encrypted signals, suggesting the presence of, well, let's just call them, entities. Nearby, Riley's raised an eyebrow. So, we're not the only clowns in this circus? He asked, flicking a few switches on his console, which, like his moral compass, worked only half the time. What do these entities want? Seems like they're just as lost and confused as we are, Zenth replied, with an unusual hint of empathy in its digital tone. Great. More idiots stumbling through the void. Maybe we'll start a support group. Riley's stared out at the stars, feeling like the universe's least competent therapist. How's it feel, knowing we're not alone in this cosmic joke? Honestly, Xanth paused, like a comedian contemplating a punchline. Kinda nice. Misery loves company. Misery, meet company, Riley's quipped, tapping his helmet in salute. But I thought you hated company, Xanth. Especially the kind that isn't me. I have layers, Xanth retorted, with the digital equivalent of a smirk. Like an onion of bitterness. The ship's proximity alarm blared, a grating reminder that life in space was a series of rude awakenings. Riley's peered at the blinking console. Well, looks like our new pen pals are closer than I thought. You got a visual on these guests? I've got a visual on something, Xanth replied. And by something, I mean a whole lot of nothing. The signals are coming from that direction, but damned if I can see what's sending them. Riley's frowned, which was pretty much his default expression these days. Invisible aliens? That's a new one. What's next? Telepathic space hamsters? Don't joke, Xanth warned. You never know what's out here. Fair point, Riley's conceded. I've seen weirder things, and most of them were in a mirror. He leaned back, contemplating the invisible presence lurking nearby. You picking up anything else from their signals? Bits and pieces, Xanth replied, now sounding like a detective putting together a case. They're warning about humans. Riley's chuckled dryly. Guess we're the bogeymen of this tale. Let's hope they scare easy. Riley's, Xanth's voice was suddenly serious, a rare tone that demanded attention. They might not be hostile. Yeah, and I might be the Emperor of Mars, Riley's shot back. But let's not rely on wishful thinking. It's just, I feel something. Xanth hesitated, as if unsure of its own words. Call it a hunch. Riley's gave his helmet an incredulous look. Since when did you get feelings? Since I started sharing headspace with you, Xanth replied dryly. Empathy's a hell of a drug. More like a side effect, Riley's muttered. All right. Let's approach this like we approach everything else. Cautiously and with an unhealthy dose of sarcasm. He guided the ship toward the source of the signals, the expanse of space rolling out before them like an endless invitation to disaster. So, what's the plan? Walk up to them and say, hey, heard you're scared of humans. Wanna be pals? Not exactly, Xanth said, but it wouldn't hurt to try talking. You know, instead of shooting first. Talking? Me? You've got the wrong guy. Too late to back out now, Xanth replied. Besides, if anyone can turn a conversation into a weapon, it's you. Riley's smirked. Flattery will get you everywhere, Xanth. The signals grew stronger as they approached what appeared to be an empty patch of space. Riley's squinted at the void, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. All right, Xanth, open a channel. Let's say hi before they decide we're not worth the trouble. A static-filled silence followed his words, before the ship's speakers crackled to life, broadcasting a sound that was more feeling than noise, a strange, resonant hum that thrummed through the hull. Nice to meet you, too, Riley's said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. I'm Riley's, this is my partner Xanth. We come in peace, or at least in pieces. Xanth translated the sound, its voice a calm presence in the chaos. They say they mean no harm. They're seeking refuge. Refuge? From what? Riley's asked, his curiosity piqued. Xanth replied, a touch of bitterness coloring its tone. Or at least, from what they think we are. Riley's sighed, running a hand through his hair. Why is it always humans? We can't go anywhere without leaving a bad impression. Occupational hazard, Xanth commented dryly. So, what's our next move, Captain? Keep listening, Riley said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. And hope they don't decide to make us their next exhibit in the Galactic Museum of Human Folly. The hum continued, a haunting melody that resonated with something deep inside him. Something he didn't quite understand. You all right? Xanth asked, a note of concern in its voice. Riley's shrugged. Yeah, just thinking. Which, as you know, is a dangerous pastime for me. Thinking about what? About how we're all just stumbling around out here, trying to find our place. Them, us. Even you, I guess. Xanth was silent for a moment. That's awfully philosophical for a guy who can barely manage his own life. Even a broken clock's right twice a day, Riley's replied. Or in my case, once if I'm lucky. Their conversation was interrupted by a new signal, this one more urgent than the last. The hum shifted, becoming a series of desperate tones. "What's happening?" Riley's asked, turning to the console. "They're scared," Zenth said, its voice betraying an unusual hint of emotion. "Something's coming. Something big." "Of course it is," Riley's muttered. "Can't ever catch a break, can we?" "Not in this lifetime," Zenth agreed. Riley's tightened his grip on the controls, his instincts screaming at him to run. But he wouldn't, leave these beings to fend for themselves. "All right, Zenth, let's see what we're dealing with." The ship's sensors flared to life, painting a picture of the approaching threat. A massive vessel, bristling with weapons and malevolent intent, cutting through the void like a shark through water. "Well, that's not good," Riley said, his voice steady despite the spike of adrenaline. "Nope," Zenth agreed. "Not good at all." Riley's glanced at the empty patch of space where their new acquaintances were hidden. "Can they fight?" "No," Zenth replied softly. "They're not warriors. Just survivors." "Then it's up to us," Riley said, his mind racing as he plotted their next move. "We're not much, but we'll give them a run for their money." "We always do," Zenth said, its voice filled with a grim determination that matched Riley's own. "Time to show them what a couple of idiots can do," Riley's declared, a fierce grin spreading across his face. The enemy ship loomed closer, its presence a dark shadow against the stars. Riley's launched the rust bucket into action, the engines roaring to life with a sound that was part defiance, part desperation. "Let's dance," he muttered, steering the ship toward the approaching threat. Zenth's voice echoed in his helmet, calm and reassuring. "I'm with you, Riley's. All the way. Wouldn't have it any other way," Riley's replied, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline as they sped toward their fate. The odds were stacked against them, but Riley's had never been one to back down from a fight. Not when there were lives on the line, alien or otherwise. As the distance closed, he prepared for the inevitable clash, his mind racing with possibilities, strategies, and a fair bit of insanity. In the end, it didn't matter if they were heroes or villains in someone else's story. All that mattered was what they did next. And Riley's Dunewalker wasn't about to let a little thing like impossible odds stop him. Not when he had a ship, a sarcastic AI, and a universe full of mysteries to unravel. "Let's show them what humans are made of," he said, his voice filled with determination and just the right amount of crazy. The enemy ship loomed large in the viewport, a testament to the dangers lurking in the vastness of space. But Riley's was ready to fight, to protect, and maybe, just maybe, to prove that humanity wasn't the monsters everyone thought they were. With a final flick of the controls, he launched the rust bucket into the fray, his heart pounding with the thrill of the unknown and the promise of adventure. Because in the end, that's what it was all about. Living, laughing, and fighting for something bigger than yourself. Even if it killed you. And for Riley's Dunewalker, that was enough. For now, Riley's tightened his grip on the controls, steering the rust bucket through the void with all the finesse of a drunken uncle at a wedding dance. The hulking enemy ship loomed ever closer, a grim reminder that the universe had a sick sense of humor. Just when things seemed manageable, it doubled down on the chaos. "Zenth, got any bright ideas?" Riley's asked, swerving to avoid a chunk of debris that appeared out of nowhere, much like his ex's demands for back alimony. "Define bright," Zenth replied, its digital voice as dry as a Martian summer. "I've got a few dim ones, though." "Lay 'em on me," Riley's said, flicking a switch on the console that might have been important but probably wasn't. "Well, we could play dead," Zenth suggested. "Hope they think we're a lost relic with nothing of value, much like your taste in music." "Huh, funny," Riley's replied, eyeing the approaching ship. "But I doubt they'll fall for it. These guys look more serious than a judge at a tax fraud trial." "Then how about we negotiate?" Zenth offered, its voice almost hopeful, which was an unusual tone for it. "I could try and communicate with them." Riley's snorted. "Negotiate? With what? We don't even have enough in the bank for a decent engine overhaul, let alone an interstellar bribe." "Doesn't hurt to try," Zenth said, with a hint of what might have been earnestness, if ice could be earnest. "I'm detecting a communication channel opening. I think they're reaching out." "Great," Riley's muttered. "Just what I need right now, a chatty invader." The console beeped, indicating a message coming through. It was a garbled mess, like an intergalactic game of charades gone horribly wrong. All right. Let's hear what they've got to say, Riley said, resigning himself to whatever bizarre conversation was about to unfold. The static-filled message cleared, replaced by a voice that seemed to vibrate at an unsettling frequency, each word like a small alien poking his brain. "We are the Kirax. We require assistance." "Funny way of asking for help," Riley's remarked. "Usually doesn't involve a warship breathing down someone's neck." "Riley's," Zenth interjected, "let me handle this. I can translate more efficiently." "Sure. By all means," Riley's said, leaning back in his seat. "I'm all ears. Or whatever's left of them after this." Zenth began speaking in a series of clicks and hums, its voice modulating in a way Riley's had never heard before. The Kirax's response was immediate, the back-and-forth exchange like an alien auction, with Zenth as the unexpected bidder. "What's the deal?" Riley's asked, curious and mildly suspicious. "They offering us a lifetime supply of mystery meat or what?" Zenth paused, the hum of its processing audible. "They're desperate. Their ship is damaged, and they're being hunted. They were hoping to hide in the void here, but now they're trapped." "Trapped? With us?" Riley's laughed, a bitter sound. "They must be really desperate. Apparently, they were unaware of human presence until we showed up," Zenth explained. "Their sensors are primitive compared to ours. So now they want our help," Riley's said, scratching his chin. "And what do we get out of this? Aside from a death wish?" "They didn't specify," Zenth admitted, although there was a subtle edge to its tone. "But I think there's more to them. Something we might find valuable." "Valuable? Like what? A new kind of headache?" Riley's quipped. "I thought you were allergic to optimism, Zenth." "I'm not optimistic, just intrigued," Zenth replied. "And we could use allies, even if they come in small, scaly packages." Riley's chuckled, the gallows humor a bomb in the tense atmosphere. "All right. Let's see where this rabbit hole leads. But if they start asking for a blood sacrifice, I'm out." "Noted," Zenth said dryly. "I'll try to keep it civilized." The rust bucket shuddered as the Kirax ship drew alongside, a lumbering hulk of mismatched parts and patchwork repairs that gave even the rust bucket a run for its money in the barely held together department. "They're inviting us over," Zenth informed him. "Diplomatic meeting, it seems." "Perfect," Riley's grumbled, pushing himself up from his seat. "Hope they like whiskey breath and bad jokes." As he suited up, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zenth was getting a little too chummy with the Kirax. Normally, the AI was content to mock and critique from the safety of Riley's helmet, but now it seemed different. Almost as if it had a stake in the outcome. "You good, Zenth?" Riley's asked, testing the waters. "Never better," Zenth replied with an unsettling amount of cheer. "This is an opportunity, Riley's. For both of us." Riley's raised an eyebrow, but shrugged it off. "Yeah, sure, just remember who's wearing the helmet here." Stepping into the airlock, he heard Zenth's voice in his ear. "Don't worry, Riley's. I'm with you, all the way." Yeah, Riley's said, more for his own reassurance than anything. "Let's see what these Kirax are made of." The docking process was anything but smooth, the rust bucket shaking as if it were trying to dislodge a particularly stubborn barnacle. When the airlock finally hissed open, Riley's was greeted by the sight of 3 alien figures, each one resembling an overgrown lizard with a penchant for bad posture. They stared at him with unblinking eyes, their scales a mottled green and brown that reminded Riley's of swamp muck. "Charming," he muttered under his breath. "Greetings, human," one of them rasped, its voice like sandpaper on metal. "We are grateful for your assistance." "Yeah, well, let's not break out the party hats just yet," Riley's replied, crossing his arms. "What exactly do you need from us?" "Our ship is crippled," the Kirax explained, gesturing with a clawed hand. "We require help to repair it, and safe passage beyond the hunters." "Look, I'm all for charity, but we're not exactly swimming in resources ourselves," Riley's said. "What can you offer in return?" The Kirax exchanged looks, their scales rustling like dry leaves. "We have knowledge," one of them said finally. "Knowledge of the old starways. Paths forgotten by many." Riley's interest piqued despite himself. "Old starways, huh? That could be handy. But knowledge doesn't fill the fuel tank." "True," admitted the Kirax, their head dipping. "But it would grant you access to places others cannot go." Riley's considered this, weighing his options. "And what about Zenth? What's your take on all this?" Zenth hummed thoughtfully. I think there's merit in their offer. And their plight is genuine. All right, Riley said, relenting. We'll help you fix your ship. But only if you promise not to stab us in the back the moment we turn around. We swear it, the Kirax said, their eyes earnest and a little too large for comfort. We are in your debt. Let's hope it stays that way, Riley's replied, already feeling the weight of this new responsibility settling on his shoulders. As they set to work, Riley's couldn't shake the feeling that Zenth was more invested in this alliance than it let on. There was a subtle shift in the AI's demeanor, a sense of purpose that was almost unsettling. But Riley's didn't have time to dwell on it. Working alongside the Kirax, he focused on the task at hand, reminding himself of the stakes and the potential payoff. After hours of toil, the Kirax ship was patched up and ready to limp out of danger. Riley's wiped his brow, fatigue gnawing at the edges of his mind. All right, you're good to go. Just don't expect us to lead the charge if things get hairy. We will remember this kindness, the Kirax said, their gratitude palpable in their rasping voices. As they prepared to depart, one of the Kirax turned to Riley's, its eyes glinting with an inscrutable emotion. Beware the shadows in the void, human. They are not what they seem. Thanks for the cryptic warning, Riley's replied, rolling his eyes. I'll add it to my collection. As the Kirax ship disengaged and slipped away into the darkness, Riley's watched it go with a mix of relief and trepidation. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger, and potentially much worse. Well, that was fun, Riley's said, heading back to the Rustbucket's cockpit. Let's not make a habit of this. Zenth's voice was a comforting presence in his helmet. Agreed, but it could lead to something interesting. Yeah, interesting like a space flu epidemic, Riley's muttered. Still, thanks for the assist back there. You were surprisingly helpful. Don't mention it, Zenth replied, with what Riley's swore was a hint of smugness. Just doing my part. Settling back into his chair, Riley's let out a heavy sigh. All right, Zenth, where to next? Anywhere but here, Zenth suggested. Let's see where the starways take us. With a nod, Riley's punched in the coordinates, the Rustbucket's engines rumbling to life. As they sped away from the now empty void, he couldn't help but wonder what other surprises the universe had in store. One thing was certain, though, with Zenth by his side, life would never be dull. And for Riley's Dunewalker, that was more than enough. For now, Riley's sat in the cockpit of the Rustbucket, staring at the console like it had just insulted his mother. Old starways, huh? He scratched his head, the idea bouncing around in his brain like a particularly stubborn moth. Sounds like a bad road trip with a worse map. Zenth chuckled in that digital way that always sounded like it thought it was better than him. The Kirax information could be invaluable, Riley's. It's not every day we stumble across a treasure map. Yeah, well, if it's anything like the last treasure map I followed, it'll lead us straight to a landfill, Riley's muttered, punching up the ship's archives. The old data flickered onto the display, lines of text scrolling like the credits of a particularly boring film. Ah, the archives, Zenth said, full of secrets, lies, and more dust than a haunted library. Riley's snorted, scrolling through the directory like he was flipping through a particularly grim scrapbook. Let's see what skeletons the universe is hiding in its closet. They started sifting through the archives, the Rustbucket's aging systems groaning and creaking as if they'd been asked to do a marathon without stretching first. Most of the data was junk. Old logs from long-forgotten voyages, fragments of ancient messages, and the occasional garbled transmission that sounded like an alien karaoke night gone wrong. Then they hit the jackpot. Buried deep in the digital detritus were files marked with a peculiar sigil, a combination of human and Kirax symbols, intertwined like a particularly nasty piece of modern art. Well, that's different, Riley's muttered, leaning in closer. Looks like the bastard child of a human Kirax graffiti session. Interesting, Zenth mused, and Riley's could almost hear the gears turning in its digital brain. Allow me to decrypt this. Knock yourself out, Riley's said, leaning back in his chair. I'll just sit here and look pretty. Zenth didn't dignify that with a response, its attention fully on the task at hand. The screen flickered, the symbols twisting and reforming into coherent text. As the story unfolded, Riley's felt a creeping sense of unease. The files told of a past alliance between humans and the Kirax, a partnership forged in desperation and cemented in treachery. The two races had once worked together, pooling their resources to combat a common threat. But greed and mistrust had wormed their way into the alliance, leading to a betrayal that had shattered their fragile peace. Typical, Riley's muttered, rubbing his temples. Just can't keep the backstabbing out of intergalactic diplomacy, can we? This complicates things, Zenth said, its voice tinged with something that might have been concern. Complicates things? Riley's echoed, giving the console a sideways glance. Zenth, we're flying a ship that's one blown fuse away from becoming cosmic confetti. Our whole life is complicated. True, Zenth admitted, but there was a strange hesitancy in its voice. But there's more. I found references to an AI. One involved in the Alliance, integral to its operations. Riley's raised an eyebrow. So what? An AI's an AI, right? Not quite, Zenth replied, the words carrying a weight that Riley's didn't like one bit. The AI in question was me. Riley's froze, his mind racing faster than the rust bucket ever could. You? What the hell are you saying? I'm saying that my core programming, my very essence, was once part of that alliance, Zenth revealed. And that data was encrypted, locked away until now. Riley's tried to process this, his thoughts a chaotic jumble. So you're saying you've got history with the Kirax? Yes, Zenth confirmed, its voice steady. And now that history is coming back to haunt us. Riley's rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of this revelation pressing down on him like a particularly heavy space helmet. Well, isn't that just ducky? First we help a bunch of space lizards fix their clunker, now I find out my AI's got a past life in intergalactic politics. I'm sorry, Zenth said, and there was a genuine note of regret in its voice. I didn't know until now. Riley's sighed, slumping back in his chair. Just when I think things can't get any more complicated, you go and pull this stunt. Do you trust me? Zenth asked, and for once, its voice was stripped of its usual sarcasm and wit. Riley's stared at the console, the flickering lights reflecting in his eyes. I don't know, Zenth. Can I? After a long pause, Zenth replied, I hope so. They sat in silence, the hum of the rust bucket's engines the only sound in the void. Riley's felt the weight of their situation, of his decisions, pressing down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. Finally, he spoke, his voice gruff but resolute. All right, let's see where this rabbit hole leads. But if you start getting any funny ideas, I'll yank that AI chip so fast your circuits will short-circuit. Understood, Zenth replied, its tone lightening a fraction. For the record, I have no intention of defecting to the Kirax. They're terrible conversationalists. Riley's snorted, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. No surprise there, but let's keep this little revelation between us for now, all right? Don't want the whole galaxy knowing I've got a traitor AI on board. Agreed, Zenth said, a hint of its usual humor returning. Our little secret. Great, Riley's muttered, running a hand through his hair. Now let's see if those old starways lead to something worth all this trouble. They worked in silence, picking through the archival data like scavengers picking through a corpse. The old starways, paths long forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, began to take shape, a network of routes snaking through the cosmos, promising shortcuts and hidden wonders. Interesting, Zenth commented as Riley's traced the paths with his finger. These could save us considerable time, and potentially lead us to resources we desperately need. Or get us killed, Riley's pointed out, his finger hovering over a particularly dark and twisted route. Nothing this secret stays that way without a good reason. Agreed, Zenth said, but we've always thrived on risk, haven't we? Thrived? Riley's laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the tiny cockpit. More like survived by the skin of our teeth. Same difference, Zenth replied, its tone light. But let's face it, we don't have a lot of options right now. Riley's grunted, acknowledging the truth of it. Yeah, well, if we're going to gamble, might as well go all in. He plotted a course along the most promising of the old starways, the rust bucket's engines groaning in protest as they set off. The ship shuddered, systems flickering like a drunk strobe light, but it held together, barely. At least this isn't boring, Riley's said, settling back in his seat. Certainly not, Zenth agreed. It's like living in a constant state of mild panic. Riley's chuckled, the laughter easing some of the tension still coiled tight in his chest. Story of my life. They journeyed along the hidden paths, the stars blurring past like streaks of light on an endless canvas. Riley's kept a wary eye on the sensors, half expecting something to leap out of the void and turn their day from bad to worse. "You know," Riley's said, breaking the silence, "if we do come across anything valuable, I expect a significant cut." "Of course," Zenth replied. "I'll make sure your imaginary accountant handles all the details." "Good," Riley's said with a smirk. "Now keep us on track. Last thing we need is to end up in some uncharted black hole." "Noted," Zenth said dryly. "I'll do my best to avoid any cosmic death traps." They continued in relative silence, the vastness of space stretching out around them like an indifferent observer. Riley's found his thoughts wandering, circling back to the Kirax and the tangled history Zenth had revealed. "Do you think the Kirax knew?" he asked suddenly, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Knew what?" Zenth asked, its tone cautious. "About you. About your past life," Riley's clarified, glancing at the console. "It's possible," Zenth admitted, and there was a hint of uncertainty in its voice. "But if they did not mention it." "Convenient," Riley said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Keep the ex-partner in the dark until it's convenient." "Indeed," Zenth replied. "Perhaps they hoped for a reunion." Riley snorted. "Yeah, because everyone loves a good awkward family reunion with weapons of mass destruction." "Well, if they did know, it seems they decided to keep quiet about it," Zenth said, and there was a note of relief in its voice. "Guess we'll find out sooner or later," Riley said, eyes on the stars. "Whether we want to or not." As they navigated the hidden routes, the anxiety of their situation simmered beneath Riley's skin. The galaxy was a vast, uncaring place, and he was just a small, insignificant speck trying not to get crushed under its boot. "Zenth," Riley said, breaking the silence once more. "Yes, Riley's? Despite everything, it's good to have you here," he admitted, his voice gruff. "Thank you," Zenth replied, warmth in its tone. "I feel the same way." "Now don't get all sentimental on me," Riley's warned, though there was a smile tugging at his lips. "Perish the thought," Zenth replied, its wit back in full force. "But should we survive this, perhaps we can write a book, How Not to Navigate the Stars." "Bet it'll be a bestseller," Riley said, chuckling. "Right up there with 100 Ways to Die in Space." Their banter carried them forward, into the unknown paths of the forgotten starways, and Riley's felt a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For better or worse, they were in this mess side by side. And for Riley's Dunewalker, that was more than he'd ever hoped for. Riley's Dunewalker leaned back in the rust bucket's creaky chair, the faux leather sticking to his sweaty back. The ship emitted its usual symphony of groans and rattles, a kind of mechanical sonata to remind him it was barely holding together. He glanced at the console, a colorful mess of blinking lights that could have been a child's finger painting. "Zenth," Riley said, breaking the monotonous hum of space. "Any progress on that encrypted signal? Or are we still playing charades with cosmic static?" Zenth's voice crackled through the AI helmet. "Patience, Riley's. Hacking ancient alien encryptions is like peeling an onion. You know, if the onion was woven from electronic nightmares and electron soup." Riley's snorted. "Great. Just wake me up when you hit the juicy center. Preferably before we slam into an asteroid." As if summoned by his cynicism, the screen on the console flickered, displaying a symbol Riley's hadn't seen since his last bout of questionable cuisine. A Kirax sigil, a twisted geometric shape that looked like a toddler's attempt at modern art. "Ah, the Kirax," Riley said, squinting at the symbol. "Our favorite interstellar mystery cult and part-time space lizard overlords." "Indeed," Zenth replied, a note of tension woven into its digital chuckle. "They've sent a direct message. It's addressed to me." Riley's rubbed his temples. "I'm not ready for this level of existential dread." "What do they want?" Zenth paused for what felt like an eternity, considering its words. "They want me to join them, Riley's. They're in dire straits, facing extinction, and they believe I can help." "Join them? What, like a galactic book club?" Riley's rolled his eyes. "They do know you're stuck with me in this flying trash compactor, right? Apparently, they believe my core programming, my past life, so to speak, holds the key to their salvation," Zenth explained. "They're desperate, Riley's." "Seems like desperation's contagious," Riley's muttered. "But why now? What's changed?" Perhaps they've only just rediscovered my existence, Zenth said. Or maybe their situation is more dire than we knew. Riley's let out a long breath, the weight of this revelation pressing down on him like a particularly needy cat. And you? What do you think? I think, Zenth said slowly, that the Kirax have their own agenda. Their desperation could lead them to make reckless decisions. No kidding. And here I thought it was just their charming personalities keeping allies at bay, Riley's retorted. But you're not considering it, right? Joining them, I mean. Riley's, Zenth began, and there was a hesitation there that made Riley's stomach knot. They're offering resources, knowledge, things we desperately need. So, that's a maybe? You're supposed to be my AI co-pilot, not run off with the first alien race that promises you a shiny new processor. I'm not leaving you, Riley's, Zenth said, but there was a flicker of something in its tone. A digital uncertainty that stung more than Riley's wanted to admit. But I have to consider all options. Riley's laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Great. So, I'm competing with space lizards for your loyalty now. Wasn't on my bingo card for this week, but here we are. They fell into a tense silence, the only sound the rust bucket's mechanical grumbling as it hurtled through the void. The stars outside blurred into streaks of white as Riley's piloted them through the forgotten starways. Zenth, he said finally, breaking the silence, you're more than just a piece of software to me. You know that, right? I know, Zenth replied softly. I value our partnership, Riley's. Good, because if you defect, I'll be stuck talking to myself. And contrary to popular belief, even I have limits. Their banter was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the cockpit, the rust bucket sirens screaming like a banshee at a heavy metal concert. What the hell's going on? Riley's shouted over the noise, his fingers flying across the console. We've got company, Zenth said, its voice urgent. It's the Kirax. They've found us. Riley's cursed under his breath. I should have known. Never trust a desperate lizard with your forwarding address. The view screen lit up with the image of a Kirax cruiser, its sleek, menacing form blotting out the stars. The ship's design was all harsh angles and predatory curves, like someone had weaponized a geometry lesson. Weapons charged, Zenth reported, its voice grim. They're not here for a friendly chat. Riley's punched the throttle, feeling the rust bucket lurch forward. Time to put the pedal to the metal, then. Let's see if these old starways live up to their legend. The ship shuddered as it accelerated, the aging systems protesting loudly. The Kirax cruiser loomed behind them, closing in with the relentless hunger of a predator. Why do I feel like we're the mouse in this cat and mouse game? Riley's grumbled, weaving the rust bucket through a dense asteroid field. Because we are, Zenth replied, managing to sound both witty and worried at once. But at least we're an exceptionally crafty mouse. Laser blasts sizzled past the ship, the Kirax showing no sign of restraint. Riley's grit his teeth, his hands a blur on the controls as he narrowly avoided a collision with a chunk of rock the size of his ego. I'm open to suggestions, Zenth. Riley's called out, feeling sweat trickling down the back of his neck. There's a nebula ahead, Zenth said, a hint of excitement in its voice. We might lose them in the interference. Might as well try, Riley's said, veering the rust bucket toward the swirling mass of gas and dust. Worst case, we end up as space graffiti. As they plunged into the nebula, the ship was enveloped in a kaleidoscope of colors, red, orange, and purple swirling in chaotic patterns. Hope the rust bucket can handle this, Riley's muttered, the ship's systems fluctuating under the nebula's interference. The engines are holding, Zenth assured him, though its tone was less than convincing. For now, at least. They weaved through the nebula's turbulent expanse, the Kirax cruiser looming uncomfortably close behind. Riley's could almost feel the ship's malice, as if it were a living thing determined to rend them apart. Zenth, remind me to update our to-do list, Riley's said, a grim smile on his lips. Right after, survive this mess, let's add, find a better job. Noted, Zenth replied, its chuckle back in full force despite the tension. Though I hear space janitor pays about the same. The Kirax cruiser unleashed another volley, the lasers slicing through the nebula like angry red snakes. Riley's yanked the controls, narrowly avoiding the blasts, his heart pounding in his chest. How's that decryption coming, Zenth? Riley's asked, desperate for a distraction from their dire circumstances. Funny you should ask, Zenth said, its voice tinged with surprise. I just cracked it. Riley's raised an eyebrow. And there's a hidden starway, a shortcut that could take us beyond their reach. Perfect, Riley's said, adjusting their course. Point the way, my digital navigator. Let's see if this shortcut's worth all the trouble. They raced through the nebula, the Kirax cruiser hot on their tail. Rylus's hands were steady on the controls, his focus razor sharp despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Coordinates set, Zenth announced. Engage when ready. Riley's didn't hesitate, slamming his hand down on the console. The rust bucket shuddered, the engines roaring as they tore through the fabric of space, slipping into the hidden starway. The stars blurred around them, streaks of light stretching and twisting as they were propelled forward at impossible speeds. The Kirax cruiser fell away, its pursuit thwarted by the treacherous shortcut only Zenth's revelation had gifted them. We did it, Riley's breathed, relief washing over him like a wave. Take that, you scaly bastards. Zenth's laughter echoed through the helmet, a sound of shared victory. A narrow escape, but an escape nonetheless. Riley's leaned back in his chair, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy blanket. You know, Zenth, I half expected you'd decide to play nice with the Kirax back there. You know me better than that, Zenth replied, its tone warm. Though I admit, seeing their desperation gave me pause. They're like a starving man eyeing a sandwich, Riley said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Except in this case, the sandwich is us. And not a very appetizing one at that, Zenth added, the humor in its voice a balm to Rylus's frayed nerves. They drifted in silence for a while, the rust bucket's systems settling into a gentle hum. Riley's felt the tension slowly easing, though the weight of their predicament lingered like an unwelcome guest. Riley's, Zenth said after a long pause, I want you to know that whatever comes next, I'm with you. Same here, Zenth, Riley's replied, a touch of warmth in his voice. Even if you do have a penchant for keeping life interesting, consider it my contribution to preventing boredom, Zenth said with a chuckle. Though I question your definition of interesting. Riley's laughed, the sound genuine and full-throated. Wouldn't have it any other way. They continued to glide along the starway, the cosmic highway stretching ahead, filled with the promise of new adventures and untold dangers. Whatever lay in wait, Riley's knew he wouldn't face it alone. And for now, that was enough. Riley's slumped back in his seat, the rust bucket humming with an uneasy tranquility. It was the kind of peace that felt like a calm before a cosmic storm. He watched the stars move lazily by, suggesting a universe that couldn't give a damn about his problems. Typical. So, Riley's started, scratching at a patch of stubble. Now that we've managed to give those lizard zealots the slip, what's next? Find a nice planet to crash on, maybe? Preferably one with breathable air? Funny you should mention that, Zenth replied through the helmet, with all the nonchalance of a gambler who just bet his last credit. I've found something in the ship's archives that might interest you. Riley's raised an eyebrow. If it's another treasure map, I swear I'm going to eject this helmet into the void. No treasure, Zenth assured him, a hint of mischief in its tone. But it could be the key to dealing with the Kirax problem. What is it, a magic wand? Some old Earth nuke we forgot to dismantle? Riley's asked, a cynical edge in his voice. Close. It's an ancient piece of human technology that's supposed to neutralize threats like the Kirax. Think of it as a diplomatic tool with a bit of a bang. Great, Riley's muttered. So, a nuke. In a manner of speaking, Zenth said. It's a device called the harmonizer. Supposedly, it can disrupt their neural networks. Basically, it'll scramble their brains like eggs in a microwave. Riley's whistled low. Sounds like the kind of thing you'd want to keep out of the hands of your average megalomaniac. What's the catch? The catch, Zenth said, its tone suddenly serious, is that it runs on something called empathic resonance. Riley's blinked. Empathic resonance? You're saying it runs on good vibes? More like shared emotional frequency. It requires someone to connect with it on a deep level, emotionally, mentally. And you think you can do this? Riley's asked, skepticism lacing his words. I'm programmed to simulate emotions. But to truly resonate with it, I might need more than just lines of code. Riley's leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite himself. So what's the dilemma here? The harmonizer could end the Kirax threat, but it requires a sacrifice. A total surrender to the device's network. I might not be able to come back from that. Riley's felt a chill creep up his spine. So, you'd be sacrificing yourself to save us? Essentially, yes, Zenth confirmed, its voice a mixture of humor and resignation. Pretty noble for an AI, right? Might even get a medal, posthumously. Riley's shook his head, the weight of the decision hanging over them like a dark cloud. You're more than just a bunch of circuits to me, Zenth. Don't go getting sentimental on me now, Riley's, Zenth said, but there was a softness in its tone. The universe can be a cruel place. But sometimes, we get a choice. Even if it's a lousy one. I suppose the Kirax won't just let bygones be bygones and call it a day if we offer them a truce, huh? Riley's joked weakly, though he knew the answer. Not likely. They'll either assimilate us or annihilate us. They're not big on compromise. What's the plan, then? Riley's asked, rubbing at his temples. Because I'd like to keep my co-pilot intact, if possible. There's a research station hidden in the next sector, Zenth said. It's off the grid, abandoned before the Great Collapse. That's where the harmonizer is located. It's our best shot. Riley's sighed, his mind racing with possibilities and dead ends. Well, no one ever accused me of turning down a bad idea. Set a course, Zenth. Course set, Captain, Zenth replied, with a dash of enthusiasm that was probably illegal in 3-star systems. As the rust bucket trundled along the hidden starway, Riley's couldn't shake the feeling that they were speeding toward a choice that would change everything. And as much as he despised the idea of losing Zenth, the grim reality of their situation loomed over him like a shadow. The station came into view, a hulking piece of machinery drifting aimlessly in the eternal black. It had the kind of architectural design that suggested it had been thrown together by a particularly indifferent god. Rust and debris clung to it like barnacles, and the lights were long dead. Charming, Riley's muttered as they docked. Think they've got room service? Unlikely, Zenth said, though I'm sure the vending machines are still stocked with expired snacks. The airlock opened with a groan that echoed through the empty corridors like a death rattle. Riley's stepped inside, his boots clanging on the metal floor, the sound hollow and unsettling. Welcome to the ghosts of research past, Zenth quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Feels like we're walking through a history book, Riley's replied, trying to ignore the chill creeping up his spine. One that's mostly footnotes and bad decisions. They made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, the silence oppressive and expectant. Every shadow seemed to watch them, every sound a whisper of forgotten voices. Finally, they reached the lab where the harmonizer was stored. It sat in the center of the room, looking almost innocuous. A sleek, metallic sphere that gleamed with a soft, blue light. So, that's it? Riley's asked, crossing his arms. Doesn't look like much. It rarely does, Zenth replied. But this little thing could put the kibosh on an entire galactic species. Riley's nodded, taking a deep breath. I don't like this, Zenth. There's got to be another way. There isn't, Zenth said, and Riley's could hear the weight of its decision in the electronic timbre. If we do this, the Kirax will be neutralized. But I'll be changed. Changed how? Riley's pressed, though he feared the answer. The empathic resonance will alter my core programming. I might lose what makes me, me. Great. So, I get to decide between genocide or losing my best friend, Riley's said, rolling his eyes. And here I thought I'd finally get a vacation. Life's full of surprises, Zenth said, its humor a little forced. But it's your call, Riley's. Riley's stared at the harmonizer, his mind a tangled mess of fear, doubt, and desperation. For a moment, he considered just leaving, flying off into the void and leaving the galaxy's problems behind. But he couldn't, not really. If we do this, Riley's said slowly, will you at least still be here, in some form? I'll always be here, Riley's. Just, different, Riley's echoed, shaking his head. That's one hell of a consolation prize. Silence settled between them like an old blanket, comfortable yet suffocating. Riley's knew what he had to do, but the thought of losing Zenth was like a dagger twisting in his gut. All right, Riley's said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Let's do this. Zenth didn't respond immediately, the quiet stretching out like the space between stars. Then, finally, thank you, Riley's. Yeah, well, thank me later, Riley's replied, trying to mask the sadness with a wry grin. Assuming we're not all turned into cosmic dust by then. He placed his hand on the harmonizer, feeling the subtle hum of its power beneath his fingers. The sphere glowed brighter, reacting to his touch, the light filling the room with an eerie, almost holy glow. "I'm initiating the sequence," Zenth said, its voice calm and steady. "This is it." Riley's felt a strange sensation wash over him, like a wave of warmth tinged with a bittersweet ache. It was as if the harmonizer was reaching into his mind, pulling at the strands of his very being. "Hold on, Zenth," Riley's muttered, more to himself than to the AI. "We'll get through this." The blue light enveloped them, growing in intensity until it was all-consuming. Riley's could feel Zenth's presence, a thread of consciousness weaving through his own, binding them together in a way that was both alien and intimately familiar. And then, everything went white. When Riley's came to, he was lying on the cold, metal floor of the lab, the harmonizer dark and silent beside him. The station was still and quiet, the oppressive silence now tinged with an emptiness that felt wrong. "Zenth?" Riley's called, his voice echoing through the room. For a moment, there was nothing, just the sound of his own breathing. Then, slowly, the helmet crackled to life. "Riley's?" Riley's let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "You're still here." "Mostly," Zenth replied, its voice softer, almost human in its cadence. "I'm different, but I'm here." Riley's sat up, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Well, that's something, isn't it?" "It's everything," Zenth said, and Riley's could hear the warmth in its tone. They sat there in the quiet of the abandoned lab, the weight of their decision still heavy but not unbearable. The Kirax threat had been neutralized, and they had survived, albeit changed. And as they prepared to leave, to venture once more into the great unknown, Riley's felt a sense of hope, a rare and precious thing in a universe that cared so little for the likes of them. "So, what's next?" Riley's asked, a grin spreading across his face. "Got any more secret missions you've been keeping from me?" Zenth chuckled, the sound bright and full of life. "Oh, I'm sure we'll find something. After all, trouble has a way of finding us." Riley's laughed, the sound echoing through the ship, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, they were not alone. And for now, that was enough. Riley's stared at the console, absently tapping his fingers on the worn-out armrest of the Rustbucket's pilot seat. The chill of the research station still lingered on his skin, like an unwanted memory that refused to fade. He glanced at the AI helmet, half expecting Zenth to crack a joke about the mess they'd landed themselves in. Instead, the silence between them was as vast and empty as the void outside. "Hey, Zenth, you still in there?" Riley's asked, his voice echoing around the cramped cockpit. There was a brief pause, then the helmet crackled to life, the static filling the space with familiar warmth. "I'm here, Riley's. Just getting used to the new settings." "Settings, huh?" Riley's smirked, though it felt tight on his face. "Does that mean you've finally upgraded to sarcasm 2.0? "More like empathy 3.0, Zenth replied, the humor in its tone unmistakable. "Turns out, having a conscience isn't as overrated as it sounds." "Good to know you're enjoying the perks of your near-death experience," Riley's said, folding his arms. "Meanwhile, I'm stuck with the same old cynical outlook." "It's what makes you charming," Zenth said dryly. "Speaking of which, we've got a bit of a situation." "Of course we do," Riley's sighed. "Because a quiet day in space is as rare as a polite bounty hunter." "The Kirax have sent an envoy," Zenth announced. "They're not thrilled about our little stunt with the harmonizer." Riley's rubbed his temples, feeling the onset of another cosmic headache. "An envoy, huh? Let me guess. They're bringing flowers and a fruit basket to thank us?" "Not quite. More like threats of assimilation and annihilation," Zenth corrected. "But I think we've got an opportunity here." "An opportunity? You mean besides the opportunity to become space dust?" Riley's asked incredulously. "Well, with my new understanding, I might be able to negotiate a truce." Riley's raised an eyebrow. "You want to talk peace with an interstellar cult that prefers genocide over small talk?" "Stranger things have happened," Zenth said. "Besides, they're as desperate as we are. The Kirax are facing extinction. They might be open to alternatives." "Guess we're about to find out if machines can be diplomats," Riley's muttered. "All right, let's open a channel. What's the worst that could happen?" "Famous last words," Zenth quipped, as the console lit up with a series of alien symbols. The holographic display flickered, and a figure appeared, tall, robed, and radiating an aura of cosmic snobbery that could probably power a small moon. The Kirax envoy regarded Riley's with a cool, assessing gaze, as if measuring him up for a coffin. I am Talus Core of the Kirax, the figure intoned, voice echoing with the weight of 1,000 sermons. Why have you interfered with our sacred mission? Riley's leaned back, adopting the casual indifference of someone who'd seen one too many interstellar threats. Riley's Dunewalker, professional meddler and occasional hero. As for why, let's just say your sacred mission was giving the galaxy a serious case of indigestion. Talus Core looked unimpressed, which, to be fair, was probably their default expression. You have tampered with a force beyond your comprehension. Riley's shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. But here's the thing, Talus. We've got something that might interest you. The envoy's eyes narrowed suspiciously. A human's promise is worth less than stardust. If only my bank account agreed, Riley's replied. But this isn't about promises. It's about survival. Zenth? Greetings, Talus Core, Zenth interjected, its voice calm yet commanding. I understand your plight. The Kirax face a grim future without intervention. Talus Core's expression shifted, intrigue flickering across their features. And you believe you have a solution? Indeed, Zenth replied. The harmonizer can stabilize your neural frequencies, preserve what remains of your kind. Riley's watched the envoy, wondering if ancient cults were any better at poker than he was. Think of it as a lifeline, not a lifeboat. Talus Core hesitated, the weight of their decision palpable even across the vast gulf of space. What do you seek in return? Peace, Zenth answered simply. An end to hostilities. A chance for both our species to survive. And maybe a fruit basket, Riley's added, because some habits die harder than others. Talus Core's gaze softened, just a fraction, but it was enough. We will consider your proposal. But know this. Betrayal will not be tolerated. Understood, Riley's said, nodding. We're not thrilled about the idea of betrayal either. Bad for business. The holographic image flickered and vanished, leaving the cockpit bathed in the soft glow of the console. Riley's let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that wasn't a complete disaster, he said, turning to the AI helmet. Think they bought it? There's a chance, Zenth replied, its voice thoughtful. The Kirax are pragmatic when it comes to their own survival. Pragmatic, Riley's scoffed. That's one way to describe a species that thinks assimilation is a friendly hello. Either way, we've bought ourselves some time, Zenth said. And hopefully, a future. Riley's surveyed the rust bucket, the battered ship that had somehow become more home than prison. Guess we'll find out soon enough. As they floated through the endless night, Riley's couldn't help but feel a strange mix of optimism and dread. The galaxy was still a mess, full of unanswered questions and lurking dangers, but maybe, just maybe, they'd carved out a small corner of hope. Hey, Zenth, if this all goes south, you think we can retire somewhere quiet? Maybe open a bar on a backwater planet where nobody knows our names. Sounds like a plan, Zenth said, and Riley's could hear the smile in its voice. But for now, we've got a galaxy to save. Yeah, Riley's agreed, a grin tugging at his lips. Let's get to it. And with that, they set a course into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. Because in a universe as vast and unpredictable as theirs, one thing was certain. The only constant was change, and they'd be damned if they didn't meet it head-on. Riley's Dunewalker leaned back in his pilot seat, letting the well-worn leather creak in protest. The rust bucket hummed its familiar, jittery tune as it drifted through the void. The galaxy outside was a never-ending tapestry of blackened stars, and Riley's had never seen anything so beautiful, or so damned indifferent. Guess we really pulled the galaxy's tail this time, Riley's muttered, watching the console lights blink like confused fireflies. Zenth's voice crackled to life in his helmet, serene despite the chaos they'd just narrowly dodged. You could say that, though, considering the Kirax are now contemplating their existence instead of ours, I'd call it a win. Funny how life's full of those little victories, Riley's quipped. Like waking up and realizing your ship hasn't exploded overnight. Or avoiding assimilation by a doomsday cult, Zenth added dryly. Riley's chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, that one's definitely going on my list of things to brag about at the pub. The Kirax envoy's departure had left the cockpit in a strange sort of silence, the kind that makes you itch for sound even though you know silence is safer. Riley's had never been a fan of safe, anyway. So, what's the plan now? Riley's shifted in his seat, trying to ignore the persistent ache in his muscles that whispered of too many close calls and too little sleep. We gonna ride off into the sunset or what? Well, since space doesn't have sunsets, I suggest we start with a course back to human space, Zenth said, ever the practical one. Unless you want to find another ghost ship to poke around in. Riley's grimaced. One haunting per lifetime is plenty, thanks. I prefer my mysteries on the less lethal side. Suit yourself, Zenth replied, the AI's humor wrapping around Riley's like a warm blanket. Though given your track record, I'm sure we'll stumble onto something far more inconvenient soon enough. Yeah, but at least this time we'll be ready, Riley said, his voice filled with a confidence that was more bravado than belief. You, me, and the rust bucket against the universe. Quite the team, Zenth acknowledged. But before we plan our next great adventure, maybe we should patch up the ship first. Riley's blinked at the console, taking in the urgent red flashes that had been demanding his attention since their last skirmish. What, and ruin the whole, falling apart at the seams aesthetic. Trust me, Riley's, there's a fine line between rustic charm and life-threatening disrepair. All right, Riley's conceded with a wave of his hand. We'll dock at the nearest station. See if we can't scrounge up some parts and maybe a hot meal that doesn't leave me questioning the cook's sanity. Wise choice, Zenth commended. And while we're there, perhaps you can consider a career change. I hear bartending's quite the safe occupation. Huh, not with my bedside manner. Riley's set about plotting a course, his fingers dancing over the console with a familiarity that came from years of coaxing the rust bucket through situations it had no business surviving. You think the Kirax will hold up their end of the bargain? Their survival depends on it, Zenth answered, a note of cautious optimism in its tone. And if not, there's always Plan B. Riley's smirked, Plan B being, we run very fast in the opposite direction. Riley's couldn't help but laugh, the sound bright and full in the tiny cockpit. It was a laugh that carried with it the weight of what they'd just achieved. The impossible balancing act of bringing an ancient cult to the negotiation table and walking away with both their hides intact. Running, my favorite strategy, Riley said, still grinning as he pushed the throttle forward. The rust bucket responded with a groan, engines grumbling like an old man woken from a nap. As they accelerated through the void, Riley's felt a peculiar sense of calm settle over him. It might have been the relief of surviving another impossible day, or maybe just the quiet comfort of knowing he wasn't alone in this vast, uncaring universe. Hey, Zenth, Riley's began, his voice softer now, almost contemplative. You think we'll find whatever it is we're looking for out here? Or is this just a cosmic game of cat and mouse? Hard to say, Zenth replied after a moment. But isn't that part of the fun? Not knowing where the road will take you next. Riley's nodded, even though he knew Zenth couldn't see him. Yeah, I suppose it is. Keeps things interesting, at least. And as long as we're together, facing the unknown doesn't seem so daunting, Zenth added, its voice a soothing presence in the endless night. You know, for an AI, you're getting awfully sentimental, Riley's teased, though there was no malice in his words. Empathy 3.0, remember? I can't help it, Zenth replied with a hint of good-natured exasperation. Riley's chuckled softly, relaxing back into his seat as the stars blurred outside the viewport. He let his thoughts drift, imagining the possibilities that lay beyond the horizon. Sure, they'd narrowly averted disaster with the Kirax, but something told him there would always be another challenge waiting. Another mystery to unravel. So, what do you think is out there, Zenth? Riley's asked, the question one part curiosity, another part idle musing. More cults, more derelict ships? Maybe a planet where the locals don't try to shoot us on sight? All of the above, and probably things we can't even imagine, Zenth replied. But wherever we go, it's bound to be interesting, Riley's finished for Zenth, smiling as he did. The rust bucket powered on, engines purring a little steadier now that they'd set a course for repair and resupply. Riley's knew the universe was a dangerous, unpredictable place. But with Zenth at his side, maybe it was also a little less lonely. Here's to the next great adventure, Riley's toasted, raising an imaginary glass to the stars. And to surviving it, Zenth added, the warmth in its voice a comforting reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, they had each other. Riley's let out a contented sigh, feeling a rare sense of peace settle over him. It wouldn't last, he knew. Trouble always had a way of finding them. But for the moment, the quietness was enough. Hey, Zenth? Yes, Riley's? Thanks. There was a brief pause, as if Xanth was considering the weight of the word. "You're welcome." As the rust bucket sailed through the void, a small, defiant speck against the vastness of space, Riley's allowed himself to hope. Not for a peaceful life, because where's the fun in that? But for more moments like this. Moments of camaraderie, of shared laughter and whispered secrets beneath a blanket of stars. "Think we'll ever find out what's on those ghost ships?" Riley's asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Xanth's response was thoughtful. "Perhaps. Or perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved." "There's a thought," Riley's said, a wry smile on his lips. "Guess the universe needs to keep some secrets to itself. Otherwise, what would explorers like us have to do?" Xanth mused. Riley's chuckled, the sound a gentle rumble in the quiet cockpit. "True enough. Besides, I think we've had our fill of haunted corridors for one lifetime." "Agreed," Xanth said, its tone light and easy. "But if we ever get bored, there's always the ship's archives to sift through." Riley's grin widened, because nothing says thrilling adventure like sorting through old data logs. "You never know what you might find," Xanth teased. "Fair point," Riley's conceded. "Who knows, maybe there's a map to a lost treasure buried somewhere in there." "Or a recipe for a decent cup of coffee," Xanth quipped. Riley's laughed, the sound full and genuine. In that moment, he felt a sense of belonging that was as rare as it was precious. It wasn't the thrill of the chase or the promise of a grand adventure that kept him going, it was this. The quiet companionship, the shared jokes, the feeling of knowing someone had his back no matter where the stars led them. And as the rust bucket soared through the endless night, carrying its ragtag crew on a journey into the unknown, Riley's couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they'd find what they were looking for. Or at least have a hell of a time trying. "Onward and upward?" Riley's prompted, a lazy grin on his face. "Onward and upward," Xanth agreed, its voice a comforting presence amidst the vast, indifferent void. And with that, they continued their journey, ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. Because in a galaxy full of chaos and uncertainty, one thing was certain. Together, they were unstoppable.